Okay, now we're going to be talking about the interrelationships among group members as is reflected in the structure of a group. Basically, social network analysis, you're analyzing the connections between people, and you kind of want to understand what is going on with those connections, and and you'll see that different groups have different aspects of the of those networks, and it's reflected in different types of groups. Like, for example, here you can see this is the group that was talked about in the textbook here, but you can see certain aspects about the networks here. You can see that this, for example, this is a network that seems to be a subgroup from the rest, and here is another subgroup here, this network over here, but they're all nevertheless part of the same group. But you can see how the interconnections are different, and how it reflects different aspects of how the group works. Okay. So with social network analysis, we're creating a map of the structure and who is connected to whom. Okay, so here is an example of how groups could be connected. And what happens, however, if you remove a couple of these connections, and you'll see that the structure of the group looks quite different. Now you have two subgroups here, one click over here and another one over here, and just removing those two connections, kind of you can visualize the difference between those two networks. Some networks are going to be centralized. So, for example, if you take a look at this group over here, or subgroup, and you could see that it looks like the center of the group is person number 2, who might be the leader, who directs information to 3, 4, 5, and 6. So maybe this is the manager, and these are 4 individuals who work under the manager, and the manager essentially gives the tasks to these particular group members to do. Okay? And that's very centralized. On the other hand, you have a subgroup here that is not at all centralized. You basically have one person talks to another, then that person talks to the next. So it's kind of like a pinwheel, So it's like going from one to the other. There's no center here. It's kind of a never-ending circle. But now if you take a look here, you can see one person connected to both of these subgroups, and you now have a complete network here with 2 subgroups. And there's subgroup A and subgroup B. Okay, they talk in the textbook about the group from that crashed in the plane. And by the way, there's a website where you can actually get some information about each of these members here, and they have some interviews that you could read, so it's pretty interesting. If you Google it, you should be able to find it. Okay, so let's talk about each of these individual names. Each of these individual circles are called nodes, and the node has different numbers of connections. For example, let's take a look at Parado over here. This node is connected to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other nodes, and essentially those individuals in those nodes essentially are communicating with Parado. They are sending information to Parado. Parado, on the other hand, communicates directly with F. Strauch over here. In this case, it's a two-way communication. Everything else is just communicated in one direction. Okay. The density of this group could be calculated by essentially how many possible ways can these individuals be connected? How many possible two-way arrows can there be? And it turns out that there really are only arrows here. If you wanted to make it completely saturated, then everybody would be connected to everybody else. But clearly that's not the case. Degree centralities is basically some individuals have connections that go in both directions, both outward and inward. So F. Strauch here, for example, is connected to E. Strauch, his cousin. Back and forth communication here, like a friendship. Same thing with him and Fernandez. And you can see that he's got actually 3 of those two-way connections here with Corrado, E. Strauch, and Fernandez. F. Strauch has several, has 3 of these two-way connections. Parado, E. Strauch, and Fernandez. But yeah, out degree is essentially communications outward. So Zerbino communicates outward to Delgado, to Paez, and to F. Strauss. There's also a two-way communication between Zerbino and Fernandez. Meanwhile, take a look at Parado here. It's in degree connections here, where the essentially the directions coming in, the communications coming in, are coming in to him. So in this case, it would be in degree. Betweenness is a characteristic of particular group members, particular nodes, essentially, where one person could be connected perhaps to 2 subgroups here. So, for example, Turcotte. Notice how Turcotte is connected to this subgroup over here, Byzantin, Canessa, and Mangino, but also connected to this subgroup over here. So Turcotte has a high degree of betweenness. Closeness refers to how close the communication is between 2 individuals. So the closer they are, the closer the arrow, the smaller the arrow, the closer they are. So F. Strauch and E. Strauch, they're cousins, obviously they're very close to each other. Now talking about holes, holes represent gaps between perhaps 2 subgroups here. For example, there is a gap between this subgroup here and this subgroup here. But look, Turcotte fills that gap. So there are certainly gaps here, but there's at least it's not a completely it's not a complete separation there. But again, so you can see these are some of the characteristics that you might see in a group's network. Okay, if we take a look at the networks and talk about the dynamics, these are kind of like maybe talk about some of the roles that may be played there, some of the aspects of them, what is going on. And again, this network, again, you can see the Strauches and Fernandez seem to be leaders here. The expeditionaries are these 4 over here. You've got Zerbino, Paez, and Algorta, maybe like subgroup leaders of these 3 groups here. These are the malingerers. These are the disabled and injured. These are the younger members here. Kind of forming a way to find categories for each of the group members here. And you may have a formal structure in a particular work group, for example, but how the actual interactions go on is different here. Maybe, as you can see, Jessica takes a quite different role in the actual unofficial structure than in the formal structure here. For example, it seems as though when people want to get information, they're going to go see. They're going to be more likely to go see Jessica than they are to go see Michael, even though Michael is the leader. When Jessica has a lot of two-way communication, say between Brandon and Ryan and Emily, and Michael communicates with Jessica, but Jessica seems to have the goods on what is going on in the group. Ryan over here also gets information from several individuals here, and but you can see that the structure looks quite a bit different when you look at it from the unofficial way. So take a look at the patterns here. For the status here, it seems as though the person number 1 has the higher status here. Person number 2 has a low status down here. Over here, though, you can see who likes each other. You can see certain patterns here. 2, 7, and 6. They 2 attracted to 7, 7 to 6, and so on. This is where the pattern of liking here. 4 and 5, they like each other, and 1 and 3 like each other. So you have like 3 separate subgroups here in terms of attraction. According to Heider's balance theory, a group is going to work well, and people are going to get along if people are going to, it's going to be a group if there's a balance. If everybody likes each other, obviously that's the best. But if there's an imbalance here, maybe A likes C but doesn't like B, and so on, there's an imbalance here. Now, if they all disliked each other, there's balance there as well. It may not be very pleasant, but at least there is balance, and they'd be able to, there's kind of at least they kind of know where everybody's place is here. We saw the attraction network here, but you can also form a network on communication. Who speaks to whom most frequently? Maybe 2 speaks to 3 most frequently. 4 and 5 talk to each other. Maybe 3 talks to 1, 1 talks to 7, and so on. So again, you can see different ways. You can pattern a network on status. You can put it on attraction, and you can do it on communication. Okay. Here you look at a communication network that is highly centralized. Everybody is talking to numero uno. He's talking to everybody else. Everybody else seems to be only talking to number 1. That's highly centralized. A decentralized one, it's not just simply one person who's getting all the information. Information is going in several directions here. Here are some illustrations of centralized and non-centralized networks. And again, you can see centralized one, there's one person in the center here. You have one person in the center here, one person in the center here, one person in the center here. These represent centralized communication networks. In a ComCon communication, it's each person is talking to each other, but there's no one central point. In the ComCon over here, everybody's connected to everybody else. Equally, there's no one central person here. And in a pinwheel formation, one person A talks to B, B talks to C, and C talks back to A, and it's just a never-ending circle there. And again, different types of network structures may be more effective than others. The centralized networks seem to be most efficient. If there's, perhaps it might be a complicated task. If the centralized person can give directions, can delegate information to one group to another, that might be useful. The more central you are, the more you feel as if you are involved, the more you feel as if you have influence, so that's often a preferred position to be in. Interestingly enough, in the hierarchy, the information flows downward from the top, because the one on top often is the one who is most informed, or at least is the one who is essentially sending out the information, sending out what he or she wants to have done. You might also have information coming up from below if there are some problems going on at the lower level. maybe unrealistically positive information flows upward. Some recent news fits in with this very well. If you are aware, General Shinseki, who is the the Department of Veterans Affairs, chairman of the Department of Veterans Affairs, part of the cabinet of President Obama. Well, he's in a little hot water because there have been several health facilities in the VA that have been doctoring up information saying that the waiting times have actually been shorter than they really were. So they were reporting 14-day or less waiting periods when the waiting periods were actually a lot longer. Well, unfortunately, some veterans died while they were waiting for care, waiting much longer than 14 days. They were required to have a maximum of 14-day waiting, but because they are so understaffed and overworked, they weren't able to do that. So they were cooking up the books and doctoring the information and sending it up to Shinseki saying, oh yeah, 14-day waiting periods, we got everything covered, we're in good shape. But they were really just lying. So, and this is a case where unrealistically positive information was flowing upward to Shinseki, and now Shinseki's in trouble. He may have to resign from the Obama administration. It's a whole mess. But this is an example where the information is coming from below is not really all that realistic. One of the assignments you had was to do structured observation, and using Bales's interaction process analysis. This is another more complex way of categorizing communication in a group, and it's called Symlog. And they're, rather than just more or less just task and relationship oriented, there's goes into a little bit more detail. And here are the categories that he examined in terms of the types of interaction. Dominance or submissiveness is if the member is active and outgoing, is more dominant, or is it more passive and quiet, introverted, then it's submissive, and the dominance is up, submissive is rated as down. Friendliness or unfriendliness, the friendliness is positive, the unfriendliness is negative. Acceptance or non-acceptance of task-oriented authority. So in the one case, is the group member more analytical and task-oriented, or they're more emotional and relationship-oriented? And if we're talking about task, then we're talking about forward. If we're talking about not accepting task authority, non-traditional, emotional, then we're talking about backward. So you can take a look at the different combinations here. So, for example, starting over here, D, silent, passive, and so they don't really say anything. They're uninvolved, and they are completely submissive. That's down, and they are neither friendly nor unfriendly, neither forward nor backward. They just don't say anything. What about DPB? D is passive, submissive. P is positive, so they're friendly. And B is backward, so they are not really task-oriented. So they're kind of like just happy and satisfied, taking it easy. They are certainly not focused on doing the task. What about someone who is UPF? They are up, so they are dominant. P, so they're positive, they're friendly. And F, they're forward, they are task-oriented. So these are the persuasive leaders. Go team, let's go and move toward our goal. So this is definitely someone who would probably be a good leader of the group, someone who has this, because they have the friendly personality, they are very task-oriented, and they're more dominant. Okay, but again, these are interesting different kinds of categories of different personality characteristics based on those types of interactions. As an example of a Symlog, again, showing you the more dominant characters over here, F Strouch and E Strouch are certainly the most dominant. They're also on the friendly domain over here, as opposed to unfriendly. And they're certainly more task-oriented up here, so they're more forward than backward. So that's an indication here. Someone over here like Harley, poor Harley over here, he certainly is not task-oriented. He is not gung-ho and working on that task. In terms of friendliness, he's somewhat friendly, kind of in the middle on friendliness. But and he has very little influence. He would be more of the passive type.